Ever wonder which saints might help your love life? Did you know there are patron saints, specifically for terrible marriages and relationship disasters? The path to holy matrimony has some surprisingly strange spiritual supporters. Number 9. Saint Valentine. More than just cards and chocolates. Who was the real Saint Valentine? The answer might shock you. Saint Valentine wasn't just one person, but potentially several different martyrs. The Catholic Church recognizes at least 3 different saints named Valentine or Valentinus, all of whom were martyred. The most popular story tells of a 3rd century Roman priest who performed secret marriages for young lovers in defiance of Emperor Claudius II, who had banned marriage because he believed single men made better soldiers. According to legend, this Valentine wore a purple amethyst ring with an image of Cupid engraved on it, a symbol recognizable to young couples as someone who could marry them secretly. Before his execution on February 14th, Valentine allegedly wrote a note to his jailer's daughter, whom he had befriended and healed from blindness, signing it, "From your Valentine." What's particularly strange is that Valentine became associated with romantic love largely thanks to medieval poet Geoffrey Chaucer. Before Chaucer's writing in the 14th century, no particular romantic significance was attached to Saint Valentine's feast day. In his poem, Parliament of Fowls, Chaucer linked Valentine's Day to the mating season of birds, writing, "For this was on Saint Valentine's Day, when every bird cometh there to choose his mate." The transformation of Valentine from obscure martyr to love mascot represents one of history's strangest marketing success stories. In the United States alone, approximately 190 million Valentine's Day cards are sent each year, not including the hundreds of millions of cards exchanged in schools. What would the original Valentine think about becoming the face of a holiday that generates billions in candy, flour, and jewelry sales? Number 8. Saint Dwinwin. The Welsh patron, saint of lovers, with a broken heart. Did you know Wales has its own patron saint of lovers? Her story makes Romeo and Juliet look like a comedy. Saint Dwinwin's story from the 5th century is essentially a Welsh tragedy. As a beautiful princess, Dwynwen fell deeply in love with a young man named Milan Daffodril, but her father had already arranged for her to marry someone else. Devastated by her impossible situation, Dwynwen prayed to fall out of love. In what might be one of the strangest answers to prayer ever, an angel appeared to her with a potion that would erase her memories of Milan and turn him into a block of ice. After witnessing this rather extreme solution, Dwynwen was granted 3 wishes. First, she wished for Milan to be thawed. Second, she asked that God meet the hopes and dreams of true lovers. Third, she requested never to marry, instead dedicating her life to God. Dwinwin established a convent on land Dwyn Island, off the coast of Anglesey, where she lived until her death around 460 AD. A church was built in her memory, and the ruins remain on the island today. Near these ruins is a well where, according to legend, the movement of fish within could predict the fate of relationships. Couples would visit the well to determine if their love would be successful. What makes Dwynwen particularly strange as a patron saint of lovers is that her own romantic story ended with magical transformation, isolation, and a lifetime of celibacy. Yet in Wales, January 25th is celebrated as Dead Santes Dwynwen, St. Dwynwen's Day, the Welsh equivalent of Valentine's Day, where cards and gifts are exchanged between lovers. Imagine having your romantic disappointment become a celebration of love for centuries to come. Talk about a bittersweet legacy. Number 7. Saint Raphael, the archangel, the ultimate supernatural matchmaker. Ever considered having an archangel as your dating coach? In the Bible, Raphael might be the original celestial matchmaker. Saint Raphael, the archangel, stands out among love-related saints because he's not actually human. He's one of the 7 archangels. His name means God heals in Hebrew. And while he's primarily known as a patron of healing and travelers, his connection to romantic relationships comes from the deuterocanonical Book of Tobit. In this ancient story, Raphael disguises himself as a human named Azarius to help a young man named Tobias journey safely to Media. Along the way, Raphael instructs Tobias how to marry Sarah, a woman who had the misfortune of having 7 previous husbands, all of whom died on their wedding night due to a demon named Asmodeus. Talk about relationship baggage. Raphael provides Tobias with bizarre but effective protection against the demon, the smoke from burning a fish's heart and liver. Following Raphael's instructions, Tobias successfully marries Sarah, drives away the murderous demon, and returns home to heal his blind father with the fish's gall. It's essentially a supernatural romantic comedy with a happy ending thanks to angelic intervention. What makes Raphael so strange as a patron of relationships is that, as an archangel, he presumably has no personal experience with human romance. Yet people still pray to him when seeking a spouse or healing a troubled marriage. Young Catholics looking for love often recite the novena to Saint Raphael for the choice of a good spouse, hoping the archangel might guide them to their perfect match, just as he guided Tobias to Sarah. In some countries, single people write letters to Saint Raphael describing the qualities they desire in a future spouse, then burn the letters, believing the smoke will carry their requests to heaven. Can you imagine putting your dating profile in the hands of an angel? Number 6. Saint Agnes of Rome, the teenage martyr who rejects all suitors. What happens when a beautiful 13-year-old girl rejects every suitor in ancient Rome? In Agnes's case, it led to martyrdom and sainthood. Saint Agnes of Rome lived during the reign of Emperor Diocletian, one of Christianity's most fierce persecutors. Born into a wealthy Roman family around 291 AD, Agnes took a vow of chastity at an early age, dedicating her virginity to Christ. This spiritual marriage to Jesus created serious problems when she began attracting suitors from prominent Roman families. When Agnes refused marriage proposals from the Roman nobility, explaining that she was already married to Christ, her rejected suitors reported her as a Christian. The prefect's son, particularly stung by Agnes's rejection, had her dragged naked through the streets to a brothel. According to legend, anyone who attempted to look at her with lust was immediately struck blind, and her hair miraculously grew to cover her body completely. When various attempts to violate or corrupt Agnes failed, Roman authorities condemned her to death at just 12 or 13 years old. She reportedly went to her execution with more joy than others go to their weddings, which is either deeply inspiring or slightly troubling, depending on your perspective. Here's where Agnes becomes a particularly strange patron saint for relationships. Despite having no experience with romantic love herself, she became associated with finding a husband. On the eve of her feast day, January 21st, tradition holds that a young woman might see her future husband in a dream if she performs certain rituals before going to bed. In some countries, girls would recite Agnes sweet and Agnes fair, hither, hither, now repair. Bonny Agnes, let me see the lad who is to marry me. It's one of history's odder transformations, a young girl who rejected all earthly marriages becoming a supernatural matchmaker for centuries to come. Even more bizarrely, on her feast day in Rome, 2 lambs are blessed at the basilica built over her tomb, and their wool is used to make the palliums, special vestments, that the Pope gives to newly appointed archbishops. What connection do blessed sheep have with finding true love? That remains one of St. Agnes's many mysteries. Number 5. St. Anthony of Padua, the finder of lost things, including spouses. Lost your keys? Pray to St. Anthony. Lost your spouse? Surprisingly, also St. Anthony. St. Anthony of Padua, born Ferdinand Martins de Bulhos in 1195 in Lisbon, Portugal, is one of Catholicism's most beloved saints. He's widely invoked as the patron saint of lost items, with countless people reciting some version of Tony Tony Look Around. Something's lost and must be found. But what makes Anthony's connection to love and marriage particularly strange is how he acquired this patronage. According to one legend, a Portuguese woman was so upset by her husband's unfaithfulness that she threw her wedding ring into the river in despair. When her husband later went fishing, he caught a fish and found the ring inside its belly. Convinced this miracle had exposed his sins, the husband reformed his ways. The grateful wife credited Saint Anthony with saving her marriage. In another story, a novice monk stole a valuable psalm book Anthony used for teaching. Anthony prayed for its return, and the thief subsequently experienced terrifying visions that compelled him to return the book and repent. This incident helped cement Anthony's reputation as someone who could find what was lost, whether objects, people, or relationship harmony. What's particularly odd about Anthony as a marriage saint is that he was a celibate Franciscan friar who died at age 35, having spent his adult life in religious poverty. Yet in parts of Brazil, Portugal, and Italy, young women seeking a husband will pray to Saint Anthony, sometimes resorting to unusual practices to get his attention. One tradition involves stealing a small statue of Saint Anthony from a church and holding it hostage until he provides a suitable husband. In the Portuguese 13 Tuesdays of Saint Anthony devotion, unmarried women attend Mass on 13 consecutive Tuesdays, praying for Anthony's intercession in finding a spouse. Some even send the saint spiritual wedding invitations once they become engaged to thank him for his matchmaking assistance. For a man who chose a life without marriage, Anthony has spent centuries of his afterlife deeply involved in other people's romantic affairs. What would this austere Franciscan think about becoming the go-to saint for relationship problems? Number 4. Saint Amand, the patron saint of bartenders, brewers, and unhappy marriages. Having a terrible marriage in the Middle Ages. There's a saint for that. Saint Amand was born in Lower Poitou, France, around 584 AD. After spending 15 years as a monk on an island near La Rochelle, he traveled extensively as a missionary throughout present-day France and Belgium, converting countless pagans to Christianity. He founded numerous monasteries and eventually became Bishop of Maastricht. What makes Amand particularly strange as a saint associated with marriage is the unusual combination of his patronages. He is simultaneously the patron saint of brewers, innkeepers, bartenders, vineyard workers, merchants, and also of unhappy marriages. The connection to alcohol production makes historical sense. Many early monasteries established by missionaries like Amand brewed beer and made wine both for consumption and as a source of revenue. Monks were often the best brewmasters in medieval Europe, developing techniques that are still used by breweries today. But how did Amand become associated with troubled marriages? Historical records are frustratingly vague on this point. Some suggest it stemmed from his talent for reconciliation between warring factions during his missionary work. Others point to legends of specific marital interventions where his prayers supposedly saved marriages on the brink of disaster. What's particularly odd is the combination of patronages. Need help with your failing marriage? The patron saint of bartenders is on the case. This unintentionally creates a strange spiritual circularity. The saint people might pray to after drinking too much at the tavern is the same one they petition for help with the marital problems potentially caused by said drinking. Throughout Belgium and northern France, couples experiencing marital difficulties would make pilgrimages to churches dedicated to Saint Amand, seeking his intercession to restore harmony to their relationships. Whether these pilgrimages included stops at monastery breweries along the way isn't recorded, but the possibility adds another layer of strangeness to Amand's unusual spiritual portfolio. Number 3. Saint Denisius of Rome, from actor to martyr to wedding, to dogger's helper. Can a patron saint have a side hustle? Denisius somehow manages to be the patron of both actors and wedding photographers. Saint Denisius lived in the early 4th century and worked as an actor and comedian in Rome during the reign of Emperor Diocletian. According to legend, Denisius was performing in a play mocking Christian sacraments, specifically baptism, for the entertainment of the emperor. When he was baptized as part of the performance, Denisius experienced a genuine conversion, declared himself a Christian on stage, and refused to continue mocking the faith. Enraged by this public conversion, Diocletian ordered Denisius to be tortured and ultimately beheaded when he wouldn't renounce his newfound faith. This dramatic life-to-stage-to-death transformation made Denisius the patron saint of actors, comedians, entertainers, lawyers, epileptics, thieves, and torture victims. What makes Denisius particularly strange in the context of love and marriage is his modern adoption as the unofficial patron saint of wedding photographers. How did an actor turned martyr end up watching over people documenting nuptials? The connection appears to be his patronage of actors, combined with the theatrical aspects of weddings and the performative elements of photography. The prayer to Saint Denisius by photographers includes lines asking for patience and perseverance to capture the right moment and to help us see, with your loving eyes, the beauty in every person and situation. Wedding photographers particularly invoke him when dealing with challenging family dynamics during wedding photo sessions, something Denisius, who literally died rather than perform against his conscience, might appreciate. In an era of elaborate wedding photo shoots and social media-worthy matrimonial moments, having a patron saint who understands both performance and principled stands seems particularly fitting. Though one wonders what this 4th century martyr would make of being asked to help with Instagram-perfect wedding poses nearly 1,700 years after his death. Number 2. Saint Hyasin of Poland, the patron saint of those who need a quick escape, including from bad marriages, ever needed to make a fast getaway. Saint Hyasin has your back, especially if you're carrying heavy items. Saint Hyasin, Jacek in Polish, was born into Polish nobility around 1185 and became one of the first Polish Dominicans. His claim to fame and the source of his strange connection to those seeking escape comes from a legendary incident during the Mongol invasion of Kiev in 1240. As the city was being sacked, Hyacinth rushed to save the Blessed Sacrament from the monastery chapel. According to the story, as he was leaving with the large monstrance, he heard the voice of Mary coming from a heavy alabaster statue asking, "Are you going to leave me behind?" Despite the statue's enormous weight, Hyacinth supposedly replied, "My lady, your image is too heavy, I cannot carry it." To which Mary responded, "If you would lift it, my son will make it light." Miraculously, Hyacinth was able to carry both the monstrance and the massive statue out of the monastery as the Mongols bore down on them. This feat earned him the nickname Saint Hyacinth with the monstrance and made him the patron saint of those in need of protection and those who need to make quick escapes, which brings us to his strange connection to marriage. In parts of Poland and Lithuania, Saint Hyacinth became the person to pray to when needing to escape a bad or abusive marriage. In an era when divorce was essentially impossible, those trapped in terrible marital situations would pray to Hyacinth for either a miraculous improvement in their spouse or for a safe way out of the relationship. What makes this particularly unusual is that Hyasin himself never married, and his famous miracle had nothing to do with relationship troubles. Yet his ability to carry impossible burdens while fleeing danger resonated with those feeling trapped in marriages that had become unbearable. Some folk traditions even suggested leaving small offerings at chapels dedicated to Saint Hyacinth, while reciting prayers asking for his help in either transforming a marriage or finding a way to safely escape it. For centuries before modern divorce laws or domestic violence protections, Hyacinth represented a spiritual lifeline for those with nowhere else to turn. Saint Wilgefortis, the bearded female saint who didn't want to marry. What would you do to avoid an unwanted marriage? Would you pray for a beard? Perhaps the strangest saint associated with marriage is Saint Wilgefortis, also known as Saint Uncumber, Liberata Commernis, or Anticomona, depending on the region. According to legend, Wilgefortis was a beautiful Christian princess whose father, a pagan king of Portugal, arranged her marriage to a pagan king of Sicily. Having already taken a vow of virginity dedicated to Christ, Wilgefortis desperately prayed for deliverance from this unwanted marriage. Her prayer received an unusual answer. She miraculously grew a full beard and mustache. Unsurprisingly, her prospective husband withdrew his marriage proposal, but her father was so enraged by this development that he had her crucified. This bizarre story made Wilgefortis the patron saint of women seeking to be uncumbered, liberated from abusive husbands or unwanted suitors. In England, she was known as Saint Uncumber, and women would offer oats at her shrine while praying. O blessed Saint Uncumber, free me from his cumber burden. What makes Wilgefortis particularly strange, even by medieval saint standards, is that many historians believe she never existed at all. The most likely explanation for her legend involves misinterpretations of Eastern crucifixes showing a bearded Christ wearing a long tunic rather than just a loincloth. When these images reached Western Europe, some people mistook the robed figure for a crucified woman, and a legend developed to explain this female crucifixion victim. Despite serious doubts about her historical existence, devotion to Saint Wilgefortis spread throughout Europe during the late Middle Ages. She was especially popular in areas where arranged marriages were common, and women had few rights to refuse unsuitable matches. In parts of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, she was known as Communisses Distress, and women would leave small offerings at her shrines, while praying to be freed from troubles, particularly unwanted romantic attention or abusively unwonships. Some traditions even suggested that praying to her, while placing a shoe before her image, would help find a better husband to replace the current one. Although the Catholic Church officially removed Wilgefortis from the calendar of saints in 1969, acknowledging her likely fictional status, folk devotion to this bearded female saint continues in some rural European areas to this day. Some feminist scholars have even reclaimed her as a symbol of resistance against patriarchal control over women's bodies and choices. Have you ever wondered what it says about medieval society that a woman would rather grow a beard than get married? Or why, of all the possible divine interventions, facial hair was considered the most effective way to avoid an unwanted marriage?